Hey everyone. Tonight we begin not with bullets or banners, but in a trench carved from frozen mud, where rifles jam in the cold and boots crack like glass with every step. Breath hangs in the air like smoke, and the only fire is the one burning inside a man desperate to see the morning. You've heard tales of blitzkrieg and iron panzers, but the real enemy on the Eastern Front wasn't just the Red Army, it was the winter itself. A white abyss that froze fuel in tanks, turned bread into stone, and stripped men down to their rawest instincts. This isn't strategy or glory. This is survival measured in hot stones passed like relics, in horse carcasses turned into shelters, in belts boiled into soup. If history's darkest corners spark your curiosity, hit like and subscribe. And tell me, where are you watching from? And what's the coldest night you've ever endured now? Wrap yourself tight, we march into the frost-bitten nightmare. You stand there, a ghost in summer fatigues, watching the landscape transform. The ground beneath your feet, once merely earth, has become an unyielding slab of iron, impossible to dig into. The air bites with a ferocity you never imagined, a raw, sharp pain that settles deep in your lungs with every breath. It's an unforgiving, relentless cold, far beyond anything you've ever known, dropping to an unimaginable 22 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes even lower. Your rifle, the very tool of your trade, feels alien in your numb fingers, a block of frigid metal that jams with alarming regularity, its mechanisms seizing in the bitter clutch of winter. You watch your comrades, their faces etched with weary disbelief, as they struggle with tanks that simply refuse to roar to life. Their diesel engines solidified into useless blocks of ice. The mighty machines, symbols of an unstoppable advance, now sit silent, hulking monuments to a plan gone horribly, tragically wrong. You recall the whispers, the confident predictions that had filled the barracks just months ago. A quick victory, a lightning campaign, swift and decisive, that would crush the Soviet Union before the first snow fell. Operation Barbarossa, they called it, a grand, sweeping gesture of military might. But the calendar pages, once markers of progress, now mock you with their icy precision. October turned to November, then December, and the winter. General Winter, as the locals called it, arrived not as an obstacle to be overcome, but as a living, breathing enemy, more formidable than any army. You feel it in your bones. The slow, creeping realization that the fight is no longer just against the unseen Soviets, but against the very air you breathe, the ground you stand upon, this vast, unforgiving expanse of the Eastern Front, once seen as a path to glory, has become a frozen hell, a white abyss that swallows everything. The original plan, a tactical masterpiece, a rapid thrust towards Moscow, has dissolved into a nightly battle for sheer survival. Each dawn feels like a minor miracle, a brief reprieve before the next onslaught of frost and ice. You see the evidence of this new war everywhere. Over 2 million horses, once the sturdy engines of the Wehrmacht's logistics, now lie frozen solid across the landscape. Stark, silent sculptures in the snow, thousands of supply trucks, meant to bring food and ammunition, are entombed in ice, their wheels locked, their engines silenced forever. Even the machine guns, symbols of modern warfare, have succumbed, their intricate parts freezing solid, rendering them useless. It's a chilling, undeniable truth, one that whispers through the wind and etches itself into the very fabric of your being in some divisions. More men are dying from the insidious grip of frostbite and exposure than from the terrifying thunder of Soviet bullets. You grip your chilled hands, trying to coax feeling back into them, your breath fogging in thick clouds before your face. The biting wind carries with it the sound of distant skirmishes, but even those feel less urgent, less immediate, than the constant gnawing presence of the cold. The frozen landscape stretches endlessly before you, a monochromatic tableau of despair. You had marched into this land in your light summer uniforms, confident and prepared for a different kind of war. Now, you stand on the precipice of an unknown future, acutely aware that the fight for tomorrow is less about strategy and more about the desperate, primal instinct to simply outlast the night. The question hangs heavy in the frigid air, a shared unspoken thought among your comrades in this white hell. What desperate tricks, what unimaginable measures will keep you alive until the next dawn? The world holds its breath, waiting for your answer. You remember the first time you saw it? A scene that would forever sear itself into your memory. A testament to the raw, visceral desperation that permeated every moment of existence on the Eastern Front. A cluster of your comrades, their faces gaunt and their eyes hollow, were gathered around a fallen horse, one of the 2 million that had succumbed to the relentless cold. It wasn't merely dead. It was a frozen monument, its massive form lying stiffly on the snow-covered ground. But what unfolded next was beyond anything you could have imagined. Without a word, driven by an instinct more ancient than any military training, they began to carve into its belly, a gruesome but utterly necessary act. You watched, mesmerized by the macabre efficiency, as they carefully hollowed out a space, creating a crude, temporary sanctuary within the warmth that still lingered in its large, frozen body. The image is haunting, one that revisits you in the fitful sleep of fleeting moments. You, too, would eventually find yourself crawling into such a place. The interior of a horse carcass, seeking refuge from the murderous cold. The smell, the smell was overwhelming at first. A thick, cloying stench of blood, entrails, and animal warmth. It clung to your uniform, to your hair, to your very skin for days afterward. It was a smell that no amount of scrubbing or airing out in the frigid wind could truly dissipate. A constant reminder of the extremity of your survival. But within that gruesome cocoon, you found a temporary haven. The thick hide, surprisingly effective, provided a shield against the biting wind, and the residual body heat, coupled with the insulating properties of the frozen flesh, offered a warmth more profound than any blanket. You would huddle inside, pressed against the frozen tissue, feeling the strange, almost surreal comfort of its interior. It was a warmth born of death, a life sustained by its grim inverse. And as the nights deepened, you realized the full, horrifying utility of these fallen beasts. They were not merely shelters. They were repositories of life. The thick, yellowed fat, painstakingly rendered over tiny, hidden fires, became a source of much-needed calories, a greasy, almost tasteless broth that kept the hunger at bay, if only for a few hours. The bones, painstakingly cracked open, yielded marrow, a rich, nutrient-dense paste that felt like pure gold against the backdrop of constant starvation. You learned, with a grim efficiency, to scrape the hides, to process them, to use them as crude insulation for your makeshift shelters, or to wrap around your feet. A desperate attempt to fend off the relentless march of frostbite. It was a survival story ripped straight from the wildest, most desperate corners of human experience. A scene akin to those whispered tales of frontier survival. Except this wasn't some remote wilderness in the American West. This was Stalingrad. This was Smolensk. This was the Eastern Front. You were there, a witness and a participant in a profound degradation, a reduction of human existence to its most primal form. Every act, every desperate measure, reinforced the brutal truth war had stripped away every pretense of civilization, every veneer of comfort, leaving only the raw, burning instinct to survive. And you, along with your comrades, were living proof of that instinct, enduring the unthinkable, finding warmth within the cold embrace of death itself, just to see the fragile light of another frozen dawn. The memory of that unique, blood-soaked warmth would forever be a part of you, a testament to the extreme lengths to which humanity can be pushed. You feel it constantly, a hollow, gnawing ache in your stomach that never truly dissipates. The hunger is a companion, a shadow that follows you through every freezing day and terrifying night. Rations, when they arrive at all, are meager, often frozen solid and quickly depleted. So, you learn to adapt, to redefine what constitutes food. You recall the disbelief, the sheer revulsion, the first time you saw a comrade carefully unbuckling his leather belt, not to adjust his trousers, but to prepare it for supper. Then, you found yourself doing the same. With grim determination, you would boil your leather belt, your boots, even pieces of your saddle if you were fortunate enough to have one, in the hopes of rendering them into something, anything, vaguely edible. The process was long, the results often disappointing. The leather, even after hours of simmering in melted snow, would remain tough, rubbery, and almost devoid of flavor. Yet, you would chew it slowly, meticulously. The act itself a desperate charade to trick your protesting stomach into believing it had received sustenance. It was less about nutrition and more about the psychological comfort of chewing, of engaging in the ritual of eating. You learned to extract what little gelatinous mush you could. A strange, viscous liquid that was more a placeholder for food than actual nourishment. Each slow, deliberate bite was an act of will, a quiet defiance against the starvation that sought to claim you. Sometimes, a flicker of hope would appear in the form of abandoned fields, their frozen soil clinging to the last remnants of the harvest. You would spend hours, your numb fingers scraping at the icy ground, searching for frozen potatoes. Each one unearthed was a treasure, a priceless gem. You would thaw them carefully, then devour them, sometimes raw, sometimes boiled. Each starchy bite a luxury beyond measure. Their blandness was a comfort, a familiar taste in a world stripped of all familiarity. These frozen potatoes, once forgotten by the earth, now offered a fleeting taste of something real, something that momentarily silenced the incessant pangs of hunger. Then came the vitamin tea, a concoction learned from the local Siberian peasants, who, in their harsh wisdom, knew how to coax life from the unforgiving land. You would gather pine needles, their sharp scent a welcome change from the pervasive smell of frost and fear, and boil them in melted snow. The resulting liquid was bitter, earthy, and strangely aromatic, a potent brew designed to ward off scurvy, that insidious disease that would creep into the weak and malnourished. You drank it, a silent toast to the resilience of human knowledge, a desperate hope that this ancient remedy would offer some protection against the unseen enemy within your own body. Beyond the leather and the pine needles, your diet descended into even more primal realms. You would gnaw on bark from trees, its rough texture and bitter taste a stark reminder of your plight. You'd scrape moss from rocks, hoping for some minute calorie count, some minuscule nutrient. And when true despair set in, you would scavenge. Half-destroyed barns, shattered by artillery, became sites of desperate exploration, where you might find rotting grain, moldy and barely recognizable, but still, undeniably, calories. The hunger erased all disgust, all normal sensibilities. The line between edible and inedible blurred, then vanished entirely. Anything that could be chewed, anything that contained a hint of energy, became a potential meal. You were reduced to a primal state, a scavenger in a frozen wasteland. Your every waking thought dominated by the relentless quest for sustenance, for the fuel to simply survive another hour, another night. The sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in a brief, brutal symphony of oranges and purples before surrendering to the deep, inky black of a Russian winter night. And with the darkness comes an amplified threat. The cold intensifies, and the danger of detection looms large. An open flame, a beacon of warmth against the freezing temperatures, would also be a beacon of death. An immediate target for Soviet artillery. The flash of a match, the flicker of a fire, would instantly betray your position, inviting a swift and brutal end. So, you learned the silent, secret ways of keeping warm, a desperate ingenuity born of extreme necessity. The trick was simple in concept, yet fraught with risk and effort. You would dig shallow pits, just deep enough to conceal the embers, shallow enough to dissipate most of the smoke. Into these pits, you would carefully place your fuel-dried horse dung, collected painstakingly from the frozen fields, its unpleasant odor a small price to pay for the promise of heat. Sometimes, if you were lucky, you'd find peat, dense and slow-burning, offering a more sustained warmth. Failing that, you'd gather smoldering coals from a carefully managed, almost invisible fire used for melting snow for water, then transport them, embers glowing faintly, to your hidden pit. The key was minimal smoke. The horse dung, when dried and burned slowly, produced surprisingly little. A faint, wispy tendril that often blended with the frozen mist and rising breath of your comrades. Once the embers were established, you would cover the pit with a thin layer of snow or soil, effectively creating a natural insulator and a smoke filter. The heat would radiate outwards, a subtle, almost clandestine warmth that spread through the surrounding earth. You would huddle around these hidden hearths, your hands outstretched, grateful for the faintest sensation of warmth, for the slight thawing of your rock-hard bread. This was your sanctuary, a tiny island of heat in an ocean of ice. Entire squads, sometimes dozens of men, survived long, brutal nights by pressing together around these shit fires. The camaraderie born of shared desperation was palpable. You would pass a flask of rationed schnapps, share a few precious words, or simply sit in silence, listening to the muffled crackle of the dung beneath the earth, feeling the almost imperceptible warmth against your chilled skin. The smell of burning dung, a pungent, earthy odor, permeated everything. It seeped into your clothes, your hair, even your dreams. Years later, veterans would confess that the smell of burning dung haunted them for life, an olfactory memory seared into their minds. But always accompanied by the profound, undeniable truth: it had saved their platoon. It had saved them. The experience was a shocking reminder of the grotesque inversions of war. Survival, in its most brutal form, did not smell like victory parades or fragrant blossoms. It smelled of desperation, of animal waste, of the raw, earthy scent of existence clinging to life by the thinnest of threads. It was a smell that spoke volumes about the conditions, about the true nature of the Eastern Front, where the fight for warmth, for a single degree above freezing, was as vital and as deadly as any battle fought with bullets and bayonets. And as you huddled there, feeling the subtle heat rise from the hidden fire, you knew, deep in your soul, that this smell, this strange, offensive smell, was the scent of life itself. You shiver, the thin fabric of your summer uniform offering no real protection against the relentless Russian winter. The promised winter gear, heavy coats, insulated boots, thick gloves never arrived, or arrived in quantities so meager as to be useless. The logistics collapsed under the weight of the endless front, the crushing cold, and the unforeseen duration of the campaign. So, you learned to become resourceful, a tailor of desperation, piecing together warmth from whatever scraps the ravaged land could offer. Your uniform, once a symbol of German military precision, began to transform, evolving into a grotesque patchwork, a testament to the battle against hypothermia. The first line of defense was often the simplest paper. Newspapers, scavenged from abandoned towns or dropped haphazardly by supply planes, became precious commodities. You'd meticulously tear them into strips, then stuff them into every available space in your uniform, inside your tunic, beneath your trousers, even into the linings of your boots. The crisp rustle of the paper, though thin, provided a surprising layer of insulation, trapping tiny pockets of body heat. You walked with a strange, crinkling gait, a human scarecrow filled with words and promises that had long since been broken. The paper, however, was fragile. It tore quickly, dissolving into soggy pulp with sweat or melting snow, requiring constant replenishment. Then there was straw. Wherever you found it in deserted barns, scattered across frozen fields, it was gathered with fervent dedication. You'd pull apart haystacks, not for food for the starving horses, but for the dry, insulating stalks. This too was stuffed into uniforms, into boots, around your neck. It was coarser than paper, more effective at trapping heat, but it brought its own set of problems. The straw pricked at your skin, causing constant irritation, and, more disturbingly, it became a haven for lice. You learned to live with the incessant itching, the tiny, crawling companions, a small price to pay for avoiding the greater enemy of frostbite. The discomfort was a constant reminder of your changed circumstances, of the profound indignity of your struggle. The villages, ravaged and emptied, also offered up their sad, silent treasures. Curtains, once adorning windows in homes that now stood empty, were ripped down and fashioned into crude scarves or extra layers. Bed sheets, once soft against sleeping bodies, became wraps for your torso or legs. And sometimes, heartbreakingly, you would find a woman's scarf, perhaps forgotten in the rush of evacuation, or left behind by a fleeing family. These small, often brightly colored pieces of fabric, so out of place in the grim, white landscape, were seized upon, wrapped around necks or tucked into collars, offering a thin but vital barrier against the cutting wind. Each piece carried with it a ghost of domesticity, a fleeting reminder of a life that was now utterly alien to yours. You would wrap your boots with rags, binding them tightly around your feet, stuffing them with hay or straw to keep your toes from freezing solid and turning black. The sight of your platoon, once a proud formation of meticulously uniformed soldiers, was now a shocking contrast. You looked less like an elite Wehrmacht unit and more like a collection of ragged beggars, scarecrows in the snow, each man a walking monument to improvisation and desperation. The uniforms were patched, torn, stained, and stuffed, a visual representation of your daily battle. But in this landscape of suffering, appearances meant nothing. Only survival mattered. And whatever strange, uncomfortable, or ignoble method kept the warmth within was embraced without question. You were the patchwork army, cobbled together from courage, desperation, and whatever the frozen earth would reluctantly yield. As the brutal night descends, the ground beneath you transforms into an enemy as formidable as any Soviet soldier. The frozen earth leaches heat with a terrifying efficiency, threatening to turn sleep into a permanent slumber. You quickly learned that simply lying down on the snow meant a swift journey towards hypothermia. So, the art of sleeping, once a simple act of rest, became a complex strategy, a nightly battle against the insidious cold of the Eastern Front. Every evening brought with it the ritual of preparing your makeshift bed, a desperate effort to create a tiny pocket of warmth in an otherwise lethal environment. One of the most common and effective methods was to dig. With frozen shovels and numb hands, you and your comrades would carve out shallow pits, foxholes designed not for defense, but for warmth. Once the pit was dug, you'd line it meticulously with whatever you could find: pine branches, dry grass, even discarded pieces of wood. These layers served as a crude but vital insulation, creating a barrier between your body and the relentlessly cold earth. You would then lie in these pits, feeling the slight elevation, the subtle but profound difference that even a few inches of natural material could make. It was far from comfortable, but it was a desperate step away from the absolute freezing point. Even more ingenious, and often more effective, was the practice of hollowing out snow caves. You learned from watching the locals, from the whispers of experience passed down through generations. Digging into a deep snowdrift, you would create a small, cramped chamber, just large enough for 1 or 2 men. The snow itself, counterintuitively, became an ally. Its insulating properties were remarkable, even when the outside temperature plunged to 22 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. The inside of a well-constructed snow cave could maintain a temperature just above freezing. You would crawl into these snowy wombs, feeling the immediate, albeit slight, relief. The sense of being enclosed and protected from the howling winds. The silence inside, muffled and profound, was a welcome balm to ears constantly assaulted by the sounds of war and the crackle of ice. Barns. If you were fortunate enough to stumble upon one that wasn't completely destroyed, became prizes not for shelter from enemy fire, but for the hay within. You and your squad would raid haystacks, pulling out armfuls of the dry, sweet-smelling grass, carrying it back to your trenches or foxholes. This wasn't for food for the few remaining horses. It was for bedding, for insulation, piling it high. You would sink into the hay, feeling its comforting bulk surround you, trapping your precious body heat. The scratchiness, the occasional presence of vermin, was simply ignored in the face of the overwhelming need for warmth. Another clever trick involved the frozen canvas. You would take a damp tarp or a piece of canvas, drape it over a frame of branches or even your rifles, and allow the brutal cold to do its work. Within minutes, the moisture in the fabric would freeze solid, transforming the limp material into a rigid, wind-proof shell. These frozen canvas structures, though rudimentary, provided an additional layer of protection, deflecting the biting wind and creating a slightly more hospitable microclimate. You would often sleep in groups, pressed together for warmth, sharing a single greatcoat draped over several bodies, each man contributing his meager heat to the collective survival. Guard duty was rotated in short, frequent shifts, ensuring no one froze while motionless. And as a final, crucial detail, you learned to keep your boots inside your bedding, or even nestled close to your body, to prevent them from freezing stiff overnight, rendering them impossible to put on in the morning. Each night, as you prepared your frozen bed, you were performing a ritual of survival, a testament to the human spirit's desperate ingenuity against the White Death. The field kitchen, a fragile nexus of temporary warmth, became more than just a place for meager rations. It was the origin point of a nightly ritual, a sacred act of preservation. As dusk painted the snowscape in shades of gray and blue, you and your comrades would gather there, not just for the thin soup or rock-hard bread, but for the stones. Stones, simple pebbles and rocks found in the frozen earth, were placed carefully around the fire, absorbing the precious heat like silent sponges. You would watch them, mesmerized, as their cold, gray surfaces slowly darkened, becoming radiating repositories of warmth. When the time came to retreat to your freezing foxholes or snow caves, each man would select a heated stone, carefully retrieve it, and then wrap it in a piece of rag, a spare sock, or even a section of newspaper. The heat, though intense at first, was quickly muted by the wrapping, transforming into a steady, comforting warmth. This was not a luxury, it was a lifeline. You would then tuck these hot stones into your coats, pressing them against your chest or stomach, feeling the slow, permeating warmth spread through your chilled torso. It was a sensation of pure, unadulterated relief, a temporary respite from the deep-seated cold that constantly threatened to claim you. The stones had a particular significance in the silent, desperate nights. You would place them strategically tucked between your legs, nestled against your feet, or even carefully placed inside your boots. This wasn't merely about comfort. It was about maintaining circulation, about coaxing warmth into extremities that were constantly on the verge of frostbite. The small, localized heat could mean the difference between keeping your toes and losing them to the brutal grip of the cold. The presence of that warm, heavy stone, a small sun in your freezing world, was a constant, tangible reminder that life still clung to you. Some units, with a bit more ingenuity and resources, even buried tin cans filled with smoldering embers under their foxholes. These crude, subterranean heaters would radiate a gentle, persistent heat upwards, providing a more continuous warmth throughout the night. But for most, it was the simple, heated stone that became their nightly companion, their silent guardian. You would share them, passing a stone between men in a trench, a wordless act of camaraderie and mutual survival. It was a communal warmth, a shared hope that flickered in the brutal darkness. The ritual was etched into the daily fabric of your existence. A nightly prayer for warmth. Diaries from soldiers of that time, often scrawled in freezing conditions, contain haunting attestations to their power. One entry, in particular, resonates with a quiet desperation. Without those stones, no one in my squad would have woken up. It's a chilling statement, a stark reminder of how survival hinged on such seemingly insignificant objects, pebbles warmed by fire. These stones, humble and silent, became symbols of life itself, carried close to the body, cherished like sacred relics in a land where warmth was the most precious commodity of all. They were a testament to human resilience, to the lengths you would go to find a single degree of comfort in the heart of winter's icy embrace. You look out across the vast, unbroken expanse of white, and the paradox of the Eastern Front is starkly evident. Snow, the very element that relentlessly attacks you, that freezes your equipment and claims your comrades, is also, incredibly, your most crucial ally. It is a dual force, simultaneously the bringer of white death and the unlikely source of salvation. You learn to see it not just as a blanket of misery, but as a raw, versatile material, a tool for survival in a landscape devoid of conventional resources. The snow cave, as you discovered, was a profound example of this paradox. What seemed like a foolhardy act, digging into the very thing that was killing you, was, in fact, an ancient wisdom. Within the carefully constructed walls of a snow cave, you could find refuge, a small chamber where the temperature hovered just above freezing, even as the world outside plunged to 22 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. The snow, a deceptively poor conductor of heat, became your insulator, a silent guardian against the biting winds and the crushing cold. You learned to pack it, to shape it, to rely on its unexpected generosity. You even learned to use snow for warmth in more direct, more intimate ways. Troops, especially during extended periods of stillness or extreme cold, would sleep half buried in shallow snowdrifts, leaving only their faces exposed. It was a practice borrowed from Arctic nomads, an intuitive understanding that the snow, when packed tightly, could insulate your body, trapping your own heat within its frozen embrace. The feeling was strange, claustrophobic at first, but the relief was undeniable. The snow was heavy, pressing in on you, but it offered a quiet, profound protection against the wind's merciless assault. It was a chilling intimacy with the enemy, a necessary surrender to its power in order to survive. Around your trenches and foxholes, you and your comrades would tirelessly build snow walls. These weren't elaborate fortifications, but simple, thick barriers erected on the windward side, designed to block the cutting, ceaseless winds that would otherwise strip away every vestige of body heat. The snow, piled high and packed hard, became a silent, immovable shield, providing a crucial microclimate of relative calm within your desperate shelters. You learned to build them quickly, efficiently, recognizing that every minute spent on construction was a minute gained against the cold. Perhaps the most critical, yet often misunderstood, use of snow was for water. Dehydration, insidious and dangerous, was a constant threat, as frozen landscapes offered no flowing rivers or accessible wells. Melting snow slowly, carefully, in your mouth, or packing it into your canteens and keeping them inside your coats, close to your body heat, was the only way to procure safe drinking water. You learned the hard way, or witnessed the fate of those who didn't. That eating snow directly was a fatal rookie mistake. The rapid ingestion of large quantities of freezing snow would instantly drop your core body temperature, leading quickly to hypothermia and a swift, silent death. The thirst was agonizing, but the temptation had to be resisted. The irony was brutal, yet undeniably true to survive this hell. You, the German soldier, had to embrace the very snow that was killing you. You had to learn its secrets, to respect its power, and to harness its unique properties. The White Death, in its terrifying benevolence, offered you the tools for your own preservation, a stark testament to nature's complex, paradoxical indifference. You were not just fighting an army, you were locked in a desperate, intimate dance with the elements. And in that dance, the snow, in all its pristine beauty and terrifying lethality, became your most unpredictable and vital ally. Beyond the physical assaults of frostbite, starvation, and Soviet bullets, you faced another, more insidious enemy on the Eastern Front, the creeping despair, the psychological toll of relentless suffering. In this frozen hell, mental resilience became as vital as any warm coat or loaded rifle. The mind, you discovered, was a weapon, and its discipline, a crucial shield against the relentless erosion of hope. Without it, men simply froze faster, succumbing to a hopelessness that proved deadlier than any external force. One of the simplest yet most effective strategies for preserving sanity and energy was the meticulous rotation of guard shifts. Instead of long, drawn-out hours that led to exhaustion and frozen vigilance, shifts were kept short, often no more than an hour or two. You would crawl out of your meager shelter, stand watch, your body shivering uncontrollably, your senses on high alert, only to be relieved quickly by a fresh pair of eyes. This frequent rotation prevented the total collapse that came from prolonged exposure and allowed for brief, precious moments of rest. The rhythm of these short shifts became a drumbeat of survival, a shared responsibility that knit the squad together, each man relying on the other for his chance at a brief reprieve. Routine, in a world stripped of all normalcy, became a psychological anchor. The simple acts, repeated daily, created an illusion of order, a fragile tether to the world you had left behind. You would meticulously clean your rifle, even when its parts were stiff with ice. The familiar motions, a meditative balm against the chaos. The scraping and oiling, the careful inspection, gave purpose to your numb fingers, singing softly. Sometimes just a hum or a low murmur became an act of defiance, a quiet assertion of life in a landscape dominated by silence and death. And perhaps most powerfully, writing letters home, even if they were filled with carefully crafted lies about your well-being, offered a momentary escape, a connection to loved ones, a reminder of a future that might still exist. These small, consistent rituals were not just tasks. They were acts of mental self-preservation, warding off the encroaching darkness of despair. Sleep, in this environment, was not a luxury, but a strategic resource. You heard tales of soldiers who trained themselves to fall asleep almost instantly, conserving every precious calorie, every ounce of energy. It was a skill honed by sheer exhaustion, a mental trick to shut down the overloaded senses and find oblivion. However brief, you learned to seize any opportunity for rest, however uncomfortable, however short. A few minutes of deep, dreamless sleep could refresh the mind, offering a small reservoir of strength for the next grueling task. The body needed it, but the mind craved it. A temporary cessation of the constant vigilance, the relentless fear. The greatest enemy was not the cold or the enemy, but the surrender of the will. Despair, you realized, was a contagious disease, spreading through a squad like wildfire. The hopeless man was the first to succumb to frostbite, the first to lose the will to fight, the first to simply give up and let the cold claim him. You fought it with every fiber of your being, with forced humor, with shared cigarettes, with quiet words of encouragement. The Eastern Front was as much a war of nerves, a profound psychological struggle, as it was a clash of armies and a brutal battle against nature. Your mind, disciplined and resilient, became your final, most powerful weapon. The last bastion against the overwhelming forces that sought to extinguish your spirit. It was the silent, internal war, waged minute by minute, breath by breath, a testament to the indomitable, yet fragile, power of the human will to endure. As you look back, the images coalesce into a singular, haunting tapestry. The Eastern Front, a name whispered with dread long after the last shot was fired, leaves behind a legacy of grotesque improvisation and unimaginable endurance. You recall the desperate measures, the inversions of life itself seeking warmth inside the frozen carcasses of horses, boiling leather belts and boots for sustenance, kindling hidden fires with dried dung, transforming yourself into a patchwork figure stuffed with newspapers and straw. You remember the shared warmth of hot stones, passed from hand to hand like sacred relics, the profound paradox of snow as both killer and savior, the relentless mental battle against despair. These weren't acts of heroism in the traditional sense, but primal screams of survival, raw and unadorned. The myth of the unstoppable Wehrmacht, the finely tuned engine of war, was utterly shattered on these frozen steppes. The men you fought beside, and the reflection you saw in the occasional shard of ice, bore little resemblance to the proud, disciplined soldiers who had marched east in the summer of 1941. You were less like conquerors and more like desperate scavengers, a ragged collection of frostbitten, starving figures, clinging to life by threads spun from ingenuity and sheer will. The uniforms, once symbols of power, became crude testament to suffering, patched and worn, barely holding together against the elements. The grand strategies and tactical brilliance of generals faded into irrelevance when faced with the basic, fundamental need for warmth and food. While history books meticulously record the names of battles, the movements of armies, and the outcomes of grand campaigns, it is in the memoirs, the whispered recollections of those who were there, that the true story of the Eastern Front resides. These are the narratives of the nightly war for existence, the silent, personal skirmishes against hunger, against cold, against the crushing weight of loneliness and fear. You understand, with a chilling clarity, that the harsh truth of this brutal theater of war is that more men succumbed to the insidious grip of exposure, to the silent, white death of frostbite and hypothermia, than to the thunderous, violent force of enemy fire. This, then, is the profound lesson etched into the frozen earth of the Eastern Front. War, you realize, is not merely a clash of armies, a test of military might and strategic brilliance. It is also, and perhaps more fundamentally, a desperate, unrelenting battle against nature itself. It is a confrontation with the raw, elemental forces of the world, forces that can reduce the most advanced technology and the most disciplined soldiers to their most primal state. On the frozen steppes, where the wind howled like a banshee and the snow fell endlessly, survival did not belong to the strongest, to the most skilled marksmen, or to the most decorated commanders. It belonged, with an undeniable, brutal clarity, to the most desperate and the most adaptable. And in that chilling truth, a quiet strength, a profound understanding of the human spirit's capacity for endurance, continues to echo through the silence of the long, frozen night. You are there. In late 1940, standing amidst the fading echoes of an uncomplicated peace. Your uniform feels familiar, a second skin, but not yet heavy with the weight of dread. Drills are light, almost perfunctory, a dance of practiced movements under a sky that still feels benign. You wake to the gentle routine, the predictable rhythm of camp life, a pattern that offers a comforting sense of order. The mess hall hums with quiet conversation, the smell of steady, hot meals a reassuring presence in the morning air. You feel the warmth of the coffee mug in your hands, the solid texture of the bread, the simple satisfaction of a full stomach. There is a certain ease to these days, a quiet certainty that for now, at least, the world holds still, granting you these moments of relative comfort. The distant rumble of war is a rumor, a cloud on the far horizon, not yet a storm breaking overhead. You remember those leaves? The blessed passes that allowed you to shed the uniform, if only for a few precious days, and mingle with the ordinary rhythm of life. You walk through the streets of Eindhoven, the cobbled paths cool beneath your boots, the sounds of laughter and street vendors a balm to your ears. In Dortmund, the aroma of brewing beer hangs heavy, a temptation you readily succumb to, its bitter taste a momentary escape. You sit in a bustling tavern, the low murmur of voices a comforting presence, the clinking of steins a familiar melody. Perhaps you even took a trip, drawn by morbid curiosity or simple sightseeing, to Fort Eben Emael, a fortress seemingly impenetrable, a symbol of military might, yet still a curiosity, not a stark reality. You walk its massive grounds, feeling the concrete cold beneath your fingertips, observing its formidable defenses, wondering, perhaps, what truly lay ahead, but pushing such thoughts to the back of your mind. These are days of fleeting freedom, small indulgences, a final taste of the civilian world before its gates close for what will feel like an eternity. Christmas of 1940 arrives, a quiet, almost melancholic affair. You gather with your comrades, a makeshift family in a world teetering on the edge. There are no grand celebrations, no elaborate feasts, but a shared sense of camaraderie, a quiet hope that this peace, however fragile, might somehow endure. You sing familiar carols softly, your voices blending into the cold night air, each note a prayer for an untouched future. The flickering candlelight on a small, sparse tree casts long shadows, making the moment feel both sacred and fleeting. You clutch a small, perhaps hand-knitted gift, a reminder of loved ones far away, a tangible link to a life that still feels within reach. The war, they say, is still far away, a distant echo in the newsreels, not yet a searing flame at your doorstep. You want to believe it, to hold on to that comforting illusion as the year draws to a close and a new, unknown chapter waits just beyond the veil of winter's quiet night. As the calendar turns to early 1941, a more personal shadow falls across your path. News arrives like a swift, cold gust through an open window. Your mother has passed away. The words hit you with a dull, aching thud, cutting through the thin veneer of military routine. The world seems to tilt, and for a moment, the vast, impersonal machinery of war recedes, replaced by the crushing weight of private grief. You are granted leave, a somber journey back to Berlin, a city that feels both familiar and alien in your sorrow. The funeral is a blur of hushed voices, black clothing, and the scent of lilies. You stand by the grave, the earth cold beneath your feet, watching the coffin descend, and a profound sense of loss washes over you. It's a wound that opens deep, a stark reminder of the fragile, precious nature of life, a life that feels increasingly distant from the one you now inhabit. The civilian world, once a refuge, now feels tinged with an unbearable sadness. After the funeral, after the quiet, solitary moments of mourning, you return to your unit. The journey back is heavy with reflection, the landscape passing by your window like a series of somber paintings. You resume training, this time in the stark, expansive lands of East Prussia. The air here is colder, crisper, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. The drills are no longer light, no longer just a routine. There's a new urgency in the commands, a sharper edge to the movements. You feel the strain in your muscles, the growing awareness that these exercises are preparing you for something immense, something far beyond the comfortable confines of barracks life. The feeling of the rifle in your hands changes. It becomes less a tool for practice and more an extension of your own uncertain future. By June of 1941, any lingering illusions of a distant war are irrevocably shattered. The calm, predictable routines vanish, replaced by a relentless drumbeat of activity. Constant alarms pierce the nights, jarring you awake with their shrill insistence. You are thrust into endless night marches, the rhythmic crunch of boots on unfamiliar ground, the ghostly figures of your comrades moving silently through the darkness. The air crackles with unspoken tension, a palpable sense of impending doom. Orders are barked, maps unfurled under the beam of a weak flashlight, and hushed conversations reveal the truth everyone has secretly feared but avoided. Uttering aloud, preparations are underway for an invasion. A colossal undertaking that will propel you eastward, directly into the heart of Russia. You feel the collective anxiety, the mix of apprehension and grim resolve, as the final days of June tick by, each one bringing you closer to the precipice of a conflict that will redefine not only your life, but the very course of history itself. The quiet days are over. The storm is now unequivocally at your doorstep. Then, it happens. June 22nd, 1941. The dawn doesn't just break. It cracks open the inferno. The sky, once a canvas for peaceful sunrises, is now painted with the orange glow of distant fires and the stark, blinding flashes of artillery. You are part of the surge, a wave of humanity pushing across the Soviet border, the ground trembling beneath your feet, the roar of engines, the staccato bark of machine guns, the screams of men. It all merges into a deafening symphony of destruction. You move forward, propelled by adrenaline and the sheer momentum of the advance. On that first day alone, a relentless blur of motion and danger. Your unit covers an astonishing 17 miles under a constant hail of enemy fire. Each step is a struggle, each breath a conscious effort, as the vastness of the landscape rushes toward you, hostile and unforgiving. When night finally falls, it offers no true respite. You collapse into anti-tank ditches, the cold, damp mud seeping through your uniform, pressing against your back. Your eyes remain wide open, staring up at the vast, star-pricked sky, but seeing only the lingering flashes of explosions, feeling only the profound, icy grip of fear. The air is thick, suffocating, a heavy blanket of dust and cordite that chokes your lungs. You feel the oppressive heat of the Russian summer even in the dark, a relentless warmth that seems to drain every ounce of strength. And then there are the mosquitoes, an incessant, buzzing torment. Swarms of them descending with brutal efficiency, biting at every exposed inch of your skin, leaving behind raw, itching welts. You slap at them in frustration, but their numbers are endless, their attack unrelenting. Whispers spread like wildfire through the ranks. Hushed rumors of massive Soviet tanks lurking just beyond the next rise. Armored beasts ready to crush your advance. Each distant rumble, each unseen movement in the darkness feeds the growing anxiety. The relentless pressure takes an immediate toll. Casualties begin to mount instantly, a grim, undeniable tally. Funerals are not solemn affairs with eulogies and proper burials. They are brutal, hurried rites, dug shallowly by the roadside, just off the path of the relentless march. You stand for a moment, head bowed, a brief prayer uttered, before you are forced to move on, leaving a newly turned mound of earth behind. It is then, amidst the chaos and the constant threat, that a chilling realization dawns upon you. This is no parade march, no swift victory as you might have been led to believe. This, you understand with a sickening certainty, is the opening act to hell itself. A grim introduction to a conflict that demands everything and promises nothing but an uncertain, brutal future. It is July 9th, 1941, barely 2 weeks into the inferno, when the order comes, cutting through the dull drone of distant battle comb the forest. You move into the dense woods, the canopy overhead filtering the sunlight into shifting patterns of light and shadow, creating an eerie, almost sacred quiet. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and pine needles. The only sounds the crunch of your boots on fallen leaves and the hushed whispers of your comrades. You advance cautiously, weapons at the ready, every nerve on edge. But for a time, the silence holds, stretching tautly, deceptively. It feels like the forest itself is holding its breath, waiting. Then, without warning, the world explodes. Fire erupts from every side, a horrifying symphony of destruction. Machine guns rip through the leaves above, their harsh, metallic chatter echoing through the trees. Mortars whistle down, exploding with deafening force, sending splinters of wood and shrapnel tearing through the air. Rifle shots crackle from unseen positions, precise and deadly. You are caught in a maelstrom, trapped in a deadly crossfire, the trees around you shredding as if caught in an invisible grinder. Panic threatens to seize you, but instinct takes over, urging you to find cover, to return fire, to simply survive. The battalion's lines shatter, contact lost in the chaos. Reinforcements, you learn later, are pinned down, unable to break through the murderous barrage. Your company is isolated, alone in the brutal embrace of the forest. Ammunition begins to dwindle, each shot a precious commodity, each empty magazine a growing source of dread. The air fills with the acrid scent of gunpowder and the metallic tang of blood. Then, A sharp, piercing whistle cuts through the cacophony, the command to charge. With bayonets fixed, a primal roar tearing from your throat, you surge forward, a desperate, almost suicidal lunge into the enemy positions. The close-quarters fighting is brutal, visceral, a blur of grunts and screams, steel meeting flesh. By nightfall, when the sounds of battle finally subside into a haunting quiet, only a handful of survivors remain from your company. You are battered, exhausted, your uniform torn, your body aching, your mind reeling from the day's horrors. The silence now is heavy, profound, broken only by the ragged breaths of the living and the distant groans of the wounded. Together, you dig a mass grave, a raw, gaping wound in the earth, and lay your fallen comrades to rest, their faces etched with the final moments of their lives. A shared cigarette, its smoke a thin, fragile ribbon in the cold air, is passed around, a small comfort in the vastness of your grief. You drink from a flask, the harsh liquor burning a path down your throat, but offering no true warmth, no true solace. The taste of dust, blood, and unspoken despair lingers on your tongue as you sit in the desolate quiet, waiting for the indifferent dawn. The forest massacre leaves an indelible scar, a haunting memory that rides with you as your unit presses on, an unbreakable spirit forged in the crucible of battle. You move from one objective to the next, seizing strategic high points, like the barren, windswept expanse of Hill 213. The ground here is hard, unyielding, offering little comfort. Counterattacks become a brutal dance of death, the Soviets throwing themselves against your positions with desperate fury. You see hundreds of enemy corpses littering the landscape, stark evidence of the fighting's ferocity, a testament to lives extinguished in the name of a distant command. But victory, if it can be called that, comes at a terrible price. Many German friends, men you had shared meals with, laughed with, fought alongside, are also taken, their absence a gaping hole in your ranks, their faces forever etched in your memory. Villages, once symbols of peaceful life, become strategic targets, reduced to ash and rubble to deny the enemy shelter. Their burnt remains leave a bitter taste in the air. The smell of smoke and destruction becomes a constant companion. In the frantic moments between advances and counterattacks, trenches are dug in muddy haste, shallow gashes in the earth that offer meager protection from the ceaseless shelling. You shovel tirelessly, your hands raw, the mud clinging to your boots, feeling the cold, damp earth against your skin. These crude defenses become your only sanctuary, your fragile barrier against the chaos. Nights are no longer quiet. They thunder with the relentless roar of artillery, the earth shaking beneath you, the sky illuminated by terrifying flashes. Sleep is a rare, fractured commodity, haunted by the memory of the day's horrors and the anticipation of the next. Hunger becomes a gnawing, constant companion, a dull ache in your stomach that competes with the sharper pangs of fear. Rations are meager, often cold, sometimes non-existent, leaving you feeling perpetually empty, your body slowly draining of its strength. The constant stress, the lack of food, the ever-present danger, it all grinds at you, wearing down your resolve. And then there is the ruthless discipline. Courts martial are swift and merciless, punishing any perceived act of cowardice with brutal efficiency. The message is clear. Delivered with an icy finality, weakness will not be tolerated. You see the fear in the eyes of your comrades, the grim determination to push past their own terror, knowing that hesitation, even for a moment, means death. Death, you understand, can come from either side, from the enemy's bullet, or from your own command's unforgiving hand. The choice is simple: stark and absolute fight, or perish. You move forward, your body aching, your mind weary, but with an unwavering resolve to survive another day in this unforgiving landscape. By late August of 1941, the war undergoes another shift. A subtle but significant change in its brutal rhythm. The static trench lines, where you dug in and held ground, give way to a new, relentless pursuit. The landscape itself seems to stretch endlessly before you, a vast, indifferent expanse. Day after day, you march. The skies open up, unleashing torrents of rain that turn the earth into a sticky, clinging mud. Each step is a struggle, your boots sinking into the thick, sucking mire, each stride requiring immense effort. The rain plashes against your uniform, seeping through to your skin, leaving you perpetually cold and damp. Yet, you press on, a relentless, weary force, driving toward the distant objective of Molvati. Exhaustion is a constant companion, a dull ache in every muscle, a heavy fog in your mind, but something deeper, a grim determination, keeps you moving forward, one foot in front of the other. On September 14th, after weeks of relentless slogging, a significant victory falls into your hands, a prize that electrifies the weary ranks, hundreds of enemy trucks, their engines silent, their cargo untouched. Alongside them, piles of artillery pieces, their barrels still gleaming, and an abundance of rifles, neatly stacked. It's a massive haul, a testament to the swiftness of your advance, and a much-needed morale boost. You look at the captured equipment, a temporary surge of triumph cutting through the pervasive exhaustion, a moment of tangible success in the endless struggle. As you continue to push eastward, you pass by a makeshift camp, a stark, haunting image that etches itself into your memory. Some 3,000 Soviet prisoners of war, confined behind a flimsy perimeter of barbed wire. Their faces are a canvas of despair, hollowed by hunger, etched with fatigue and fear. You see the deep-set eyes, the gaunt cheeks, the utter hopelessness in their expressions. They are a mirror reflecting the harsh realities of this war, a silent testament to the suffering that transcends nationality, a chilling vision of the human cost that resonates deeply within you. The days continue to merge into weeks, and an unsettling sensation begins to permeate the air, a feeling that grows with each mile you advance. The Demyansk cauldron, a trap of colossal proportions, is beginning to close. Its invisible walls are tightening their grip not only on the enemy, but on your own forces as well. You feel it in the air, a growing sense of isolation, a creeping unease that whispers of encirclement. It's like stepping into a giant, unseen snare, a vast, inescapable maw. The chilling irony is not lost on you. You and your comrades have been instrumental in setting this very trap. And now, it feels as though its jaws are slowly, inexorably, beginning to clamp down around you too, a foreboding presentiment of what lies ahead. October arrives, bringing with it a subtle but unmistakable chill in the air, a harbinger of the brutal months to come. Your mission shifts from relentless pursuit to the arduous task of fortification duty. You spend long, back-breaking days digging bunkers into the frozen ground, the earth resisting your shovels with stubborn indifference. The air fills with the sounds of axes biting into wood as you rip timber from the ruined skeletons of abandoned villages. the splinters flying, the wood heavy in your arms. These scavenged planks become the skeletal framework for your meager shelters, crude defenses against both man and nature. You feel the cold seeping into your bones, the dampness clinging to your clothes, and the pervasive sense of unease grows with each passing day. Then, the first flakes of snow begin to fall, a gentle, almost beautiful descent that quickly turns ominous. The white dust covers everything, transforming the landscape into a stark, silent world. It's a clear, unmistakable signal that a merciless Russian winter is rapidly approaching, a foe more formidable than any army. You feel its icy breath on your face, hear its whisper in the wind, a promise of unimaginable hardship. The anticipation of the bitter cold settles deep within you, a heavy weight. An assault is launched on the Valdai heights, a desperate push against formidable enemy positions. But the operation quickly unravels, collapsing under a series of devastating blows. Poor leadership, you realize, has led you into an impossible situation. Casualties are heavy, your ranks thinning with each passing hour, the snow stained crimson with the blood of your comrades. The brutal losses shatter morale, leaving a lingering pall of despair. You witness the light drain from the eyes of your fellow soldiers, the grim realization of their vulnerability settling in. Forced to withdraw, a bitter taste of defeat in your mouth, you undertake the somber task of burying the fallen, their bodies stiff and cold, swallowed by the frozen earth. There's no time for ceremony, only the desperate need to continue, to survive. You cling to swampy, miserable ground, the icy water seeping into your boots, making your feet perpetually numb. The conditions are abysmal, a constant battle against the elements as much as against the enemy. Christmas of 1941 finds you huddled in dark, cramped dugouts, the air thick with the smell of stale tobacco and damp earth. You are less than 100 yards from the Soviet lines, so close you can almost hear their voices carried on the wind. Supper is a meager offering, stale bread, hard and tasteless, washed down with watery coffee, barely warm. Yet, even in this bleakest of settings, a flicker of defiance remains. You and your comrades try to sing carols, your voices hoarse and strained in the frigid air, each note a poignant echo of a distant, more hopeful time, a fragile testament to the human need for light amidst the overwhelming darkness. Early 1942 ushers in a new, terrifying chapter of winter's wrath. The temperatures plunge to an unimaginable low, dropping to a brutal minus 49 degrees Fahrenheit. It's a cold that bites deep, an unforgiving chill that seeps into your very bones, making every breath a burning effort. You march through this frozen hell, the wind a cruel whip across your face, the snow blinding, relentless. Around you, men begin to freeze to death on the march, their bodies succumbing to the icy grip, their lives extinguished not by enemy fire, but by the sheer, overwhelming power of nature. You see them fall, their eyes wide with frozen terror, and a chilling realization dawns. The elements are as deadly, if not more so, than any bullet. On January 15th, the unimaginable happens. You find yourself in a small, isolated village, a handful of structures swallowed by the vast, white expanse. Only 25 German soldiers, a meager, exhausted remnant, stand guard against hundreds of surging Soviets. The odds are overwhelming, the situation desperate. The battle erupts at an almost intimate range, mere 30 yards separating you from the enemy. Grenades arc through the air, exploding with deafening roars, followed by the terrifying whistle of others flying back in response. The pristine white snow quickly becomes stained crimson with blood, a brutal testament to the ferocity of the close-quarters fighting. Your leaders fall, wounded or killed. But there is no time for grief, no pause for hesitation. They are replaced instantly, seamlessly, by the next man in line, a testament to the brutal efficiency of necessity. Every survivor fights with a primal, desperate fury, tooth and nail, for every inch of ground, for every breath. The sounds of battle are deafening, a chaotic symphony of shouts, gunfire, and explosions. You load, aim, fire, reload. Your movements automatic, driven by sheer will. The cold, the exhaustion, the fear, all are pushed aside, replaced by a singular focused survival. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, the Soviets retreat, leaving behind piles of their dead, stark, frozen figures scattered across the bloodied snow. The silence that follows is profound, almost eerie, broken only by your ragged breathing and the whimpers of the wounded. You are victorious, but at what cost? The most precious loot, you quickly realize, isn't weapons or supplies. It's the Soviet felt boots, the Valenki, tough, warm, and essential for keeping feet from freezing solid. A desperate measure to ensure men survive the unforgiving winter and the next brutal encounter. You pull them on, feeling their coarse warmth, a small, yet profoundly vital comfort in the heart of this frozen hell. From February through April of 1942, Demyansk truly becomes a boiling cauldron, a vast, inescapable trap hammered under relentless siege. You are deep inside, surrounded, cut off. Your world reduced to the immediate perimeter of your position. The earth itself seems to tremble daily from the concussive force of artillery barrages. A constant, nerve-shredding symphony of destruction. The sky, too, is a source of terror. As air raids pound your positions, their bombs shrieking down from above, shattering the icy stillness. There are even rumors, then confirmed reports, of Soviet paratroopers dropping behind your lines, a chilling reminder that danger can descend from any direction, at any time. Survival, you realize, hinges entirely on the sound of distant engines, the low, comforting drone of the Ju-52 transport planes. These are your lifelines, your connection to a world beyond the cauldron's walls, the sole source of meager supplies dropped from the sky. You watch them, a collective prayer on your lips, as they navigate the treacherous skies, hoping their precious cargo of food, ammunition, and medicine reaches you. Each successful drop is a temporary reprieve, a fragile promise of another day. You hear stories, grim whispers that spread like contagion through the ranks, of Soviet camps nearby where starvation has driven men to the unthinkable, cannibalism. The sheer horror of such tales is almost unfathomable, yet they serve as a chilling testament to the absolute brutality of this war. A stark warning of what extreme privation can do to the human spirit. It is a haunting image that lingers in your mind, a reminder of the thin veil between civilization and utter savagery. Occasionally, through the crackle of a field radio, you hear the voice of Hitler himself, his words grand and sweeping, speaking of victory and unyielding resolve. But at the front, in the icy grip of the cauldron, his words feel distant, detached, almost meaningless. Here, amidst the frozen wasteland. Only two things truly matter: the endless snow, a silent, indifferent blanket that covers everything, and the raw, staining presence of blood, a constant reminder of the fight for survival. You dig deeper. You hold your ground. You endure. Despite the relentless onslaught, despite the gnawing fear, despite the brutal cold and endless hunger, you and your comrades prove that the encirclement, for now, cannot yet consume you. Each sunrise is a small victory, each breath a defiant act against the overwhelming forces arrayed against you, as you hold your fragile line in the heart of the frozen hell. Mid-1942 brings a rare, almost miraculous reprieve from the relentless brutality of the Demyansk cauldron. You are pulled back, assigned to chemical warfare training, a strange interlude, a temporary escape from the front lines. The days are different here, less frantic, less soaked in terror. You find yourself in a field training unit, a place that feels, in comparison to the abyss you just left, like an absolute paradise. The food is better, warm and regular, a luxury you had almost forgotten. The incessant shelling is replaced by the distant rumble of training exercises, a familiar but non-threatening sound. You even find time for games, for moments of fleeting normalcy, for conversations that don't revolve around death and survival. The air feels lighter, the pressure eased, allowing you a moment to breathe, to simply exist without the immediate threat of annihilation. You appreciate the quiet, the simple act of a hot meal, the absence of constant fear, holding on to these stolen moments of peace. But as winter tightens its grip once more, the inevitable return to the front looms. You find yourself back in the snowbound trenches, the bitter cold once again seeping into your bones. Christmas is spent there, a stark contrast to the brief respite. Small, simple gifts are exchanged, a shared warmth in the biting cold. Radios crackle with distant music or news, tiny windows to a world beyond the ice and the mud. You listen, huddled close, a sense of shared humanity permeating the cramped dugout, trying to rekindle some semblance of holiday cheer amidst the stark reality. Then, on January 1st, 1943, a small flicker of personal triumph. You receive news of your promotion to lieutenant, a significant step up the ladder. For a fleeting moment, a sense of quiet pride swells within you, a recognition of your endurance, your survival. It's a brief joy, a fragile beacon in the pervasive gloom. Just 2 weeks later, on January 15th, your commander receives the coveted Knight's Cross, a distinguished honor. Morale lifts, however briefly, a wave of congratulatory whispers passing through the weary ranks. These small victories, these acknowledgments of courage and perseverance, offer a much-needed boost, a reminder that their sacrifices are not entirely unseen. Yet, even amidst these small moments of recognition, a new undercurrent of rumor begins to circulate, growing louder with each passing day. Whispers suggest that Demyansk, this seemingly unconquerable stronghold, will soon be abandoned. The implications are enormous, hinting at a strategic withdrawal, a shift in the relentless tide of the war. It's an unnerving prospect, a change that suggests a new storm is brewing, perhaps even larger, more dangerous than the last. The ground beneath your feet feels uncertain once more, and you sense the subtle, yet undeniable, turning of the historical page. February 1943. The whispers become reality. The order for retreat from Demyansk arrives, marking the end of your long, brutal stay in the cauldron. As the withdrawal begins, you are assigned a critical and perilous task commanding the rear guard. Your mission is to hold the line, to cover the retreat of your comrades, facing the enemy's fury as they press your rear. The responsibility feels immense, a heavy weight on your shoulders. But your resolve remains firm. The retreat leads you to a place called Pano, a desolate landscape that soon transforms into a maelstrom of steel and fire. Here, the Soviet forces unleash their full, terrifying might. Stalin's organs, the fearsome Katyusha rocket launchers, rain down their devastating payloads, a terrifying, wailing crescendo of destruction that screams through the air before exploding with brutal force. Mortars join the chorus, their shells hammering the frozen earth around you. And then, the tanks. Their engines rumble, their treads grind. As they advance, a terrifying, armored tide. You command your men, urging them to hold, to fight, to endure, amidst the overwhelming onslaught. Before your trenches, the stark evidence of the battle's ferocity unfolds. 20 Soviet tanks lie burning black in the pristine snow, their metal carcasses twisted and smoldering, silent monuments to the desperate, brutal defense you and your men have mounted. The scene is a testament to the raw courage and devastating effectiveness of your rearguard action. A grim, fiery victory etched against the white backdrop. But the price is personal. On February 24th, amidst the chaos and the screams of battle, you are hit 3 times. The shrapnel finds its mark once in the neck, a searing pain, another in the shin, a shock that buckles your leg, and finally, a deep, tearing wound in your thigh. You fall, the world tilting, the sounds of battle blurring into a distant roar as darkness threatens to engulf you. The pain is intense, but through it, a strange sense of clarity, even relief, begins to emerge. You are evacuated, a jarring journey through a series of field hospitals, each one a temporary haven, a step further away from the brutal front. The faces of the medics, the sterile scent of bandages, the dull ache of your wounds. It all blends into a slow, deliberate passage back to Germany. This is it. Your Eastern Front war, the harrowing, soul-defining conflict that consumed years of your life, is over. These wounds, painful and debilitating as they are, become your unexpected salvation. For from 1943 onward, as you recover, the once mighty Wehrmacht, the very army you served, begins its long, agonizing collapse, its strength ebbing away in the relentless, unforgiving landscape you have just left behind. You survived, pulled from the jaws of a war that would soon devour so many more, carried away from the impending doom on a wave of pain that, paradoxically, brought you life. And as you finally drift into a quiet sleep, you carry the echoes of the cauldron, the biting cold, and the unwavering spirit of those who endured. Deep within your very being, a story etched into the annals of your own memory, waiting patiently for the dawn.